Thank you so much for joining us today for another virtual lunchtime lecture. Today's program will discuss the Ute Creation Story, presented by Nina Gabianelli, the Vice President of the Aspen Historic Society. Nina's talents as a storyteller will soon become evident. Afterwards, Nina will introduce Skylar Lomahaftewah from the Northern Ute Tribe, sharing his personal story and the modern day Ute experience. We'll be here until 1 o'clock. Please feel free to ask questions at the end. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now may I present Nina Gabianelli. Thank you much.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to our virtual storytelling program today. We are thrilled to be back working with the Frisco Historic Park and Museum. Thank you so much. My name is Nina Gabianelli. I am the Vice President at the Aspen Historical Society. And with me today is Skylar Lomahaftewah. Come on in and say hi.
Hello.
Skylar is a member of the Northern Ute Tribe, grew up on the reservation up in Fort Duchesne, Utah, and lives here in the Roaring Fork Valley. And he and I have the great opportunity of doing a lot of education about the native people of this area in schools and in adult programming, and we're happy to be joining you again for this lunchtime series. My role as a non-native is more of that of a historian. So I'm going to share with you, as I am also a storyteller, the Ute Creation Story. It's how the Ute people believe they came to be in this land, because for hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands and thousands of years, Native people hunted in these beautiful mountains in the summertime. And then they would travel nomadically further west and further south during the winter months, and then travel back up into these beautiful high mountains in the summertime, hunting. The water resources excessive, abundant, the plant life, the hunting. So they believe they came to live in these mountains because of their creator. And their creator is someone named Sinawaf. And they believe that Sinawaf created everything that we see, all of the plants, all of the animals, the rivers, the mountains, the deserts. He created everything that we see, animals and plants first. And once he got everything living very peacefully together, he thought it was time to add the people. But in order for him to add the people, he had to make people. And in order for Sinawaf to make people, he went out into the land and he began to gather sticks. Now he picked up long sticks, short sticks, round sticks, flat sticks, tall sticks, small sticks. They were all different sizes, all different shapes, all different colors. And he sat down with a pile of sticks on one side and a big leather pouch on the other side. And he picked up those sticks and he tied them together and created a stick person. So he spent days making the stick people and then putting them in the bag, and making a stick person and putting them in the bag, and making a stick person, putting them in the bag. And once he had the bag full of people, he tied it up really tight with a knot, because he had to go out into the land to see where the people should go. But he didn't want to have to carry that big, heavy bag full of people with him on his journey. So what he did was he asked his friend, the coyote, to help him. Now the coyote, for those of you who don't know, represents the trickster, the mischief maker, or I like to call him the trouble maker. Now, I don't think that the coyote is bad. I don't think he's evil. I don't think he listens to directions. And because he doesn't listen to the directions, he never does what he's told. And because he doesn't do what he's told, he always gets into trouble. In all of the native tales from this area, the coyote is the trickster. But Sinawaf created Coyote. He loves Coyote. He trusts Coyote. So he asks Coyote to watch the bag while I am out in the land. But whatever you do, Coyote, do not open the bag. Do not open the bag. And Sinawaf goes away. Now, what do you suppose Coyote did? I hope you all said, open the bag. You're right. Coyote sat there with it for a while, I think, but you know what? There is woo, there's a smell coming out of that bag, and a sound like he couldn't understand it. He'd never heard it before, and he tried to feel the edges of the bag, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So finally, he's so curious. He unties the bag and he opens it up, and when he does, out pops all the stick people, and they start walking around, and they're all talking to each other. The only problem was they were speaking in different languages. So because they are speaking in different languages, they can't understand each other. And because they couldn't understand each other, they couldn't communicate. And because they couldn't communicate, they began to fight. And soon the fighting is turning into yelling and screaming, and fists are being thrown, and people are getting hurt. And the coyote is like, no, 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 everybody get back into the bag. But they can't hear him because they're all running around and they're screaming and yelling and going off in different directions. Next thing you know, everybody was gone out into the land. And the coyote thought, uh-oh, he's in trouble. The bag was open, the people are gone, and Sinawaf was returning. And when Sinawaf came back, he was mad. And he says to Coyote, why? Why would you do the one thing I asked you not to do? What you have done is bad. It's very, very bad, Coyote. Because now the people are out in the land, but they're in the wrong places. And they can't communicate because they don't speak the same languages. So what they're going to do is fight. They're going to fight over the land, and there will be many wars. So Sinawaf predicts wars over land in the Ute Creation Story. Now, he's so angry with Coyote. He tells Coyote he has to go away forever. He banishes him off up into the woods, into the mountains, to live alone forever. And that's why the Ute people believe that when the coyote howls at night, oh, it sounds like he's crying. Because he's lonely, he wants to come back, but Sinawaf wouldn't let him. Now, Sinawaf goes over to that bag, and you know what? There were still some people down in the bottom of the bag. So he dips his hand way down into the bottom of the bag, and he pulled out those remaining stick people. And he told them they were his chosen people. They are the Ute people. And he was going to place them here high in the mountains, where they are able to be closer to him, their creator, and where they are able to watch over the land, take care of the land, the gift from their creator, where water bubbles up out of the earth, a gift from the creator. A tree has a life and a soul. He is your brother. The rock has a soul and a life. And that's what the native people believe. And that's how they treated and used the land, right, for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Then the non-native people began to move into these western slope mountains, and I'm referring to, say, the Roaring Fork Valley specifically. And as they came in here around 1879, they were in search of minerals that were inside the mountains that had been proven through geological surveys over time. And these pioneers in the area were chopping down trees to build a log cabin. Well, the native people don't understand. Why do you take the life of a tree? My brother. But they don't speak English. We didn't speak Ute. Not we, I wasn't there. They didn't speak Ute. So they fought over the land. The miner actually pounds into the rock, makes a hole, puts dynamite in it, blows up the rock, and then takes that rock away. Well, we don't take things that don't belong to us, right? So again, there was confusion over how we were using the land. And the rancher came in and started digging up the land, destroying a gift from the creator. But we didn't speak Ute. They didn't speak English, so they fought. And in those battles, the US military greatly outnumbered the Ute warriors who fought for their land, right? But they were outnumbered, and they were eventually removed from the state of Colorado by Governor Pitkin. We live in Pitkin County here in Aspen. Governor Pitkin was the governor of a 3-year-old state in 1879. He was representing tens of thousands of non-natives living in the flat eastern part of the young state of Colorado, only 3 years old. And there were about 4,000 natives that lived in the western slope, an area that was given to them in a treaty signed by Honest Abe Lincoln back in the 1860s, giving them everything west of the Continental Divide in perpetuity. But unfortunately, the treaties were changed and made and broken and remade and rebroken. And over the years, that by 1880, the native people were removed, forcibly removed from the state of Colorado to reservation lands in northern Utah and southern Colorado. Now, there are 3 Ute reservations today. At one point, the Ute Nation covered areas that were as vast as what we now call Colorado and Utah, a state name for the Utah people, parts of Wyoming, parts of New Mexico. There were 7 tribes within the Ute Nation, and now 3 reservations remain. And as I said, Skylar is the only Northern Ute tribal member who lives today in the Roaring Fork Valley. And that's not because they can't. It's because they choose to live where their family lives and has lived for generations. But for a long time, from about 1880 through about 1924, Native people were confined and restricted to live upon their reservation lands. In 1924, they're finally acknowledged by the US government as citizens of the United States. Couldn't vote yet, though. It isn't until the 1940s where some of them were given the right to vote. And to be honest, within the Ute Nations and Ute tribes, there were some communities in Colorado where they could not vote until the 1970s. So we have some ways to go. We've come a long way, but we have some ways to go to where we are today. Gratefully, I do think most of the non-native people in this area, at least, care for our mountains, and I'm sure within Summit County as well. We care for our mountains in a way that is much more native, in a much more grateful way than we have in the past. But that's my perspective as a non-native historian on the Ute people and their their use of this land, their traditions here in this land. But I think it's much more appropriate for us to hear from Skylar about what it's like to be a today modern day Ute person. And so I'm going to turn the screen over to my friend Skylar Lomahaftewah. Come on in. I'm going to step out. There you go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Skylar Lomahaftewah. I am a member of the Northern Ute Tribe Untitled band on my mother's side. I am also a Hopi and Choctaw on my father's side. So my last name, Lomahaftewah, is a Hopi last name. It isn't a Ute last name. So I'm here to share with you some of my experience living my life growing up on the reservation, and as well living here in Aspen, Colorado, or the Roaring Fork Valley. This land where I'm at presently, the Roaring Fork Valley, was a traditional homeland to the Untitled band of Ute people, the Ute Nation. And so I always feel a very strong connection with this area because my ancestors lived here and for hundreds and hundreds of years, who knows how long, but like Nina said. But also the opportunity I found here with the Historical Society is to educate non-natives with just basic information on more or less just natives in general, as well as Ute specific. I'm not a bona fide historian or educator. I only share my experiential learning and my story, my personal story. And a lot of it is, a lot of my opinions and things I share are based off my experiential knowledge, as well as traditional oral teachings, culture from my parents, grandparents, and family, which is more or less the native way, I guess, how we carry on our traditions, knowledge, and culture of, everything that's native. So yeah, this is a little different. This is my first Zoom presentation like this that I'm doing. Hopefully I'm doing a good job. trying to be very photogenic. But anyways, one thing that I wanted to express was myself, my opinion, I guess, on our culture, Ute history and culture is our identity is primarily with our language and our cultural dances and ceremonies and things like that. It is a struggle nowadays for Native people to hold on and retain our identity as a distinct culture, you know, a little separate from other cultures around the world. One thing that I always express in our presentations is I identify myself, or one of the questions I always get is, what do we call ourselves, Indian or Native or Aboriginal or Indigenous? You know, all these fancy words, Indigenous, you know, these English fancy words. And then in the Ute language, you know, we just say, you know, for a Native person, we say Nuche or Nuche, you know, in our language. But then again, you know, if we're just common person in the street, you know, what do we say? Do we say, hey, I'm an Indian? Hey, I'm a, you know, Native? You know, because I see a lot of Native white people, I guess, or whatever. You know, they say they're a native of Aspen, they're a native of Colorado, they're a native of Florida or wherever. And then I think, you know, well, yeah, I guess. So I guess the proper way would be like, I'm a Ute American. Or if I was a Hopi, I would say I'm a Hopi American, or just like an Italian American or an African American or something like that. And then last year in Frisco, I got a suggestion or a comment from somebody, an elderly person, who was stating that some cultures, they choose to disconnect from their original rooted culture. So say a Romanian American comes to America, an immigrant, they don't really identify as a Romanian American, or a Chinese person comes, they don't want to be identified as a Chinese American. They just want to be American. And that's great. I think that's awesome. This is the land of opportunity and everything. But it was their choice to come here and disassociate from their roots. That was their choice. They don't want to be Romanian American, Chinese American. They just want to be American. And so their children, they pass that on to their children to identify more American than their culture. But that's their choice and wherever they're coming from. Whereas Native people from this country originally already here, we don't really have that choice to separate our culture. We can, actually we do, but it was more or less placed on us to be American rather than our original choice. So that was the difference I thought about. And it took me a year to come up with, you know, thinking about that and having an opinion about that. But that is something I kind of wanted to talk about, I guess, with this was the identity thing about a culture and the Native people, I guess. It wasn't really our choice to be, you know, a Native American or a Ute American or even American. But we are today, and here we are. And, you know, no matter what, you know, I always tell people, no matter what, whoever controls or whoever's the chief or leader of this land, Native people, we're from here. This is our home. So our roots and our history go too far back to even calculate. So whoever's in charge, when there's wars and there's fighting going on, Native people are one of the highest percentage in the military, because this is home. This is our like deep, deep, deep home. So regardless of whatever English word, Republican, Democrat, whatever, whoever's in charge, if we're going to war, Indians are going to fight. That's what I've seen. So in my family, I've got a lot of military people. I've actually got a relative buried in France on my Hopi side. Because in the Hopi side, when the warriors die or they fight in battle, the Hopi way is for them to be buried wherever they fall. So he fell in France somewhere, so that's where he's buried. Also on my Ute side, on my mother's side, my grandfather fought in the Korean War. A bunch of uncles were in World War II as well. So anyways, that's a little bit of something on Native people and fighting, I guess, military-wise, warriors. I heard Nina say Ute warrior, so that got me all pumped up. What I usually do with presentations in schools and with everyone is to really let it sink in with culture and identity. In my opinion, one of the biggest identifying things of a culture is the language. So if we have a different language, like Nina said before, when the clash of cultures happened 150 years ago with the Utes, and whether it was the Spanish or the Americans, the language was always a barrier. And Ute language is really hard. I'm not very fluent, but I like to express that to whoever my audience is the language, because it makes it more real to a person in their mind to see a culture as a real distinct culture. So when I say a word like Mike, Nunai Nia Skylar, that's just saying, hello, my name is Skylar. Or Nuga Unkapaga Nuche, saying I'm a Unkapagre Ute Indian guy. For little kids, counting is always a universal thing that all kids learn growing up. So I always do the Swiss, Waiani, Bayani, which is counting to 3 in Ute, Swiss, Waiani, Bayani. And I always tell kids, you guys are all speaking Ute now, so it's all gravy. And then sometimes I'll even just throw in other languages, just because I think language is a big part of a culture. So I'll say, you want to learn to count to 3? I'll say, uno, dos, tres. And they'll say, no, that's Spanish. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are cool. You guys getting it in your head, the language. So then I'll do the Swiss, Waiani, Bayani. And then they'll be rattling off Swiss, Waiani, Bayani. And I think it's really cool. And then I get bored of that. So I will throw out, just some of real resi, because I'm from the reservation and it's different. There's a lot of slang words over there that we use. And these are just kind of emotional expressions of, a feeling. So like I'll make them say that. Little kids, it's always awesome to hear them say taha and anil and so that's just kind of what Indians say on the reservation. These are expressions that we use like for things like, oh, avud, like avudcha. And that's kind of meaning like, oh, you poor thing, like, oh, you're showing emotion for feeling sorry for somebody, like they cut their arm off, and you're like, oh, avudcha, he's got no more arm. And then, well, you got another arm. So anyways, that's what I like to express with kids and people, is just the language part. I wish I could speak really fluent Ute, but like I said, it just becomes harder and harder as time goes on to retain, our culture and language and everything in this country. It's got good benefits, but it's also bad benefits, just to identify and retain a culture. Myself, I'm placed in charge of one of the Ute bear dances on the reservation. So I'm what they call a bear dance chief of the community of Randalet, Utah. It's on the reservation, and each community on the reservation used to have a bear dance, but today there's only 2 bear dances. There used to be like 3 or 4. Today there's the Randalet bear dance and the Fort Duchesne bear dance, and I'm kind of responsible for the Randalet bear dance. And so we had to have abbreviated, toned down bear dances here, but we did have somewhat of a bear dance this year due to the current health crisis. So that's a little bit about what I do, who I am. One thing I always do is I like to talk more about the modern day Ute people, where I'm from, the Ute Nation or the Ute Tribe of northeastern Utah. And these are some books here that I always show to the people, the classes. It's looking backwards on my display, but that's okay. It's the Ute Indian Tribe Big Game Proclamation from a few years ago. And all it is the hunting rule book for our hunts. We're a big hunting tribe. And we don't like poaching, apparently. But one thing I like is it's got a map of the reservation. And if you can see, the red lines are the original borders of the reservation, and the purple area, that is the modern day lands today. This area right here, Hill Creek, is some of the awesomest hunting. We've got everything: buffalo, deer, elk, mountain lion, just everything the natural environment of this area would have. It's all right in this area.
I just want to interject because this is cool that we can actually show this on the thing. So this is like the original 1880 boundary.
Right.
And then today, the only lands that are still native lands or reservation lands are the purple. Just so everybody understands, like even today from 1880, you know, when prior to that, it was Colorado and Utah. This is a small portion of northeastern Utah.
Right. And in all technical talk, this is what they call trust land, federal Indian Native trust land. Now, this red mark is the old boundary, and in today's terminology, they call it the exterior boundary. So what I also like to touch on with people is a little bit about what a reservation is. And in my mind, in my opinion, it's like a state or a county. It's just another state, another county, but a unique native nation, county, state, or whatever. Quasi-nation state is the way I like to explain it. So just like if you were a resident of Colorado and you went over to Utah, you know, it's a different, you know, set of rules, different laws, different things going on in another state. Same thing when you go to another county, same thing when you go to a reservation. What I touch upon is like governments. You have a county government, a city government, a state government, a federal government. We have a Ute Indian Tribe tribal government. So that's where I'm saying it's kind of like a quasi-nation state or a county or just another state in a way. So when people are, you know, really getting mad at us, you know, living in our nation state, getting federal funding for things, grants and programs, I'm like, well, doesn't the state of Utah, the state of Colorado, any state gets federal funding and programs just like we do? Why aren't you saying, well, how come the state of Colorado is getting more than the state of Utah or vice versa or something? It's that mindset right there. Why are you getting mad at a nation state of native people getting federal funding just like a state government does or a county government does? We do the same thing operating as a tribal government. So that is an issue I like to touch on to make it more understandable for people, because people think that native people, oh, you guys are native, you guys get money from the government. Oh my God. Like everybody gets money from the government somewhat. In some form or another, there's grants and programs. Now, we don't get directly cash in hand. Sometimes we might get it in a form of a federal scholarship, Pell Grant or whatever. These are grant programs. Same with the tribe. We get, you know, a little bit of help because this isn't our culture that we created. American society was not made by native people for native people. It was made, I would like to say, a European-based Western civilization society by and for but we're going to have it for everybody. But we're still struggling with that today. So that is something I like to touch on a little bit. And this is all just my opinion based on my knowledge growing up, you know, what I've experienced. Reservation life is more like rural life, farming life, ranching life. You know, it's got everything that's out there in the farms and everything. People ask me sometimes about, I guess racism and what do you call that?
Discrimination.
Discrimination. Yeah, I like to kind of use all the words, I guess. Discrimination, prejudice, racism, because I think sometimes somebody can be prejudiced without being racist. It's like just a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding, a lack of education. So they base whatever it is, their prejudice, on what they don't know enough of. And so they already got an opinion and idea based on, you know, whatever it is. And that's what I think sometimes prejudice is just not a lack of knowledge, not knowing. And that's what I think we're doing in a really cool way in the Valley, is kind of, you know, breaking up some of the, you know, ignorance, I guess. So anyways, there is some sort of discrimination and stuff on the around the border towns of the reservation, and that's just a lack of understanding of culture. I think if everybody kind of, you know, discussed more like we're doing here, I think, and get a better understanding, we might, you know, move forward in a more positive, progressive, productive way, I would think, my assumption. But anyways, I'm gonna transform on camera to a real native looking guy. I'm gonna share with you some of my dance regalia from my grass dancing days. This is my beadwork design that was designed by my mother. And I used to dance at the powwows a lot. And I'm not gonna put everything on, I'm just gonna put this on because you can't really see my feet or anything like that. So this is my beadwork, some of it. The design right here was made by my mother. It's kind of like your fingerprints. It's kind of like your identity, like your personal beadwork design, not to be copied or mimicked or mocked or anything like that. So anyways, when I wear this as a grass dancer at the powwows. I'm not really wearing a costume. I'm not pretending to be something else in the same way like a Halloween costume would be, or a masquerade or anything like that. This is more like my gear, my dancing gear, my attire, my powwow gear. When we hear the word costume, we think kind of, that sounds crazy. It just doesn't feel right. So we don't like that word costume so much. But I don't really get too angry. I did when I was younger, but I grew up with it. So I show this to show that our people have evolved, I guess. The grass dance originally looked a lot different from what I hear. It's from the Northern Plains tribes. And what we do today doesn't look exactly like it did 150 years ago. Just like everything we do today in all parts of our society, nothing looks exactly like it did 150 years ago. What I wear is what I wear for the powwow. Now, when I take it off, I go back to just regular Skylar the Ute guy, or like I like to say, that Ute dude. And living in Colorado, Raiders fan. I don't know. But here we go. Now I lost my train of thought. I want to talk about football, but anyways.
Tell us about your hair.
Oh, the hair. Yes. A lot of questions are, why do I have long hair? I chose to keep my hair long from pressure, not really pressure, but influence from my family, encouragement, that's the better word, from my family to honor my traditions. Because I was a powwow dancer, because I was involved with bear dance my whole life, all of my native culture, it looked nicer to have braids and long hair. And later in life, I learned, that one of the reasons native people wear long hair is an old traditional belief is that a lot of our strength and power comes out through our top of our head, in our hair, and it comes out like that. And we retain it. We retain that power by keeping our hair long. And I always compare this story to the Bible story of what is the guy's name?
What?
Samson, not Goliath.
Oh, right.
Samson. So Samson, this character in the Bible, was really strong from his hair. So it's the same concept with natives and their hair. Now, not all tribes do that. This is more of a plain style Western native people. The Eastern, I'm not too sure. I'm not educated in the Eastern native people. Some of the tribes, the Iroquois Confederation, the Senecas, the Mohawks. And then when I think of Mohawks, I think of Mohawks. So I think that's where the Mohawk hairstyle came from, was the Mohawks. And obviously they thought different with their hair. So who knows? But that's a little bit of just cultural things that I talk about. Some things that we still practice, some things we don't, because just practicality, of the modern days. But the word evolution is what I like to use a lot. Native people, we've evolved from 150 years ago, as has the world and everybody else. So when I go and do these talks, I always get a question of, how do you hunt, or how do you, they get this, people get this idea that native people on reservations are living in teepees and, riding horses and living like, 150 years ago, or like, Gunsmoke, or, these old TV shows, romanticized novels, all these ideas, that are there of native people, the romanticized noble savage, end of the trail Indian guy, all these things. And it's kind of embedded in everybody's mind of what Indians are, until we really come out like things like this and show you, hey, we're driving 4x4 trucks. We still got 400 horses, but they're just all compact in, under the hood. So Ute people, we still like horses. So there's that too. So I talk about this stuff in the evolution of native people, today in the modern days, and how we retain our culture through powwows, through our ceremonies. Like Nina said, 1970s was when we were allowed to vote. It was also the decade we were allowed to practice our religion, as our, spiritual religion that we have. Before the 1970s, it was outlawed and it was illegal. And so some tribes had to turn to the Christian side, or they integrated Christian into their ceremonies so they can say, no, we're doing Christian stuff. It's not, war dance. I think that was something that, nobody really talks about or really knows about. So when that happened in the 70s and we were allowed to practice our culture and our religion, that opened up, for a lot of us and people like me in my generation to really be strong in it. So there was a resurgence of our native culture in the 80s and 90s and to now. From the 80s to now, I would say the native culture has really picked up. But a lot of older things maybe were put away, and that's okay. But we can hold on and keep going with whatever we got. So that's one thing I like to express. And I'll kind of move right to an example of that is some of our singing. So what I do is I usually end with an example of the continuum of native culture with an example of some powwow singing, since I grew up in the powwow world. So I'll sing a Ute song taught to me by my great grandfather, Henry Sespuch, who was the bear dance chief of Randalet, Utah, before passing that responsibility on to myself. At the end of the bear dance, they had another Ute dance called the Ute Turkey Dance. And this is a song he taught me before he passed on. And so I'll share that with you now. Ute Turkey Dance song. All right, that was just a short 2 verses of a turkey dance song, and that is pretty much it for me for my little spiel here on Native people and Ute people. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for the Frisco Historical Society and the Aspen Historical Society, who I work with, for giving me this opportunity to share with you guys a bunch of Native people and just actually just myself showing off. All right, here's Nina again.
Well, stay here,
Oh, okay.
because that was awesome. Thank you so much. We are so grateful for all that you do. You know, I'm speaking for all non-native people in the world. No, but we would love to open it up for questions. If anybody does have any, you can type them into either, I guess, the chat or on live Facebook. I think we're going to get some help.
All right, so we did have a couple of questions. We did have a viewer join us late. They were interested in Skylar kind of expanding on what the reservations in Colorado look like, their locations, just a little bit more about being on the reservation.
Okay. So historically, when the Ute people were divided into the reservations, the Uncompahgre, White River, and Uinta Ute bands are over in Utah. So the Uncompahgre and the White River from this area in Aspen were removed over to Utah. Now, some of those families probably split, and some of them went to the other 2 reservations in Colorado, which is the Southern Ute Reservation down near Durango and the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation near Cortez, Colorado, on the Ute Mountain. So there's 2 Ute reservations in Colorado. Down on the southern part, the extreme southern part of Colorado, right by the border of New Mexico and the Four Corners area. So that is where the Ute reservations in Colorado are today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Skylar. And then we did have a question for Nina as well. We're wondering what's happening with the Aspen Historical Society. Any plans for the summer? Have you reopened yet?
Oh my goodness. I love whoever asked that. So we opened yesterday. Woo-hoo, our 2 museums here in Aspen. We have been operating tours and interpretive opportunities out in Ashcroft, the ghost town about 11 miles out Castle Creek, since June 16th. So that's great. And we're doing a lot of downtown and cemetery and railbed tour. We're doing a lot of walking tours this summer. So outdoor walking tours where we can maintain the social distancing that's required. And, you know, we're following all of the guidelines with both the state and the county as far as safety for us and for our guests. We are actually standing in front of a panel that will be part of our new exhibit that is being mounted now. We're working on getting it open hopefully by the middle of this month. And it's called Decade by Decade, Aspen Revealed. And this is the native panel. So we actually have an old buckskin jacket and a photograph of some native warriors, it looks like, riding across a river on their horses. You know, it inspired me. I was thinking about telling the sacred dog story. You know, native people, horses weren't introduced in this area or reintroduced until the Spanish explorers came from Europe with horses on their ships. So for hundreds of years, thousands of years, native peoples across this country were moving about on foot or with dogs that they had that, you know, would carry things. And there's a great story of a young boy who lives in it with his family, and they're having trouble hunting, and he goes to the top of the mountain and he asks the gods for help. And at the time that he's asking, a storm comes and clouds cover up the sky, and he closes his eyes and he's afraid of the lightning. And when he opens his eyes, as quickly as the storm came, it cleared, and in the sky there were these visions of this beautiful animal with long legs and big strong hind legs and a big hair coming down its neck, and it looked like a big dog. And he hears a voice saying that these are sacred dogs and that he is to take these animals, treat them as part of his family. They are not food. They are meant to be used and cared for. And so he goes running down the hill, and with this animal following behind him, you know, but he isn't afraid. He's looked into the eyes of this big creature. Imagine a little boy looking into the eyes of a horse, right? And there's no fear. And he runs out, and his family sees him being chased by these big animals. And of course they're afraid. And he says, no, 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 no. These are sacred dogs given to us by our creator. And so that's one native tale of how the horses came to be. I think we're in agreement that they came on ships from the Spanish explorers. However, that's how stories and oral tradition and history is created, is to explain something new. Imagine a new species being introduced to us today. I mean, imagine the stories we're telling about what's happening to us today that none of us could have ever predicted or imagined. And the native Ute people claim to be one of the first tribes to truly become very good equestrians, then able to travel into the plains area and introduce horses to the plains Indians. So that image of warriors on horseback, you know, which is very, like you were talking about, the iconic image of a native person, really didn't start until about 1600s.
And I like to point out, these are Utes, right? So one of the things I like to point out is Utes have always been, you know, up on fashion and unique, whatever the hottest, latest technology, Utes have always been that way. Whether it's a horse, whether it's white shirts, colored shirts,
oh yeah,
guns, everything modern. We've always been like picking up modern stuff. The hottest, latest Ford F-150, whatever, we got it.
So do we have any other questions? Or did I answer the question that was asked?
Actually, we do have one more question that arose.
Okay.
This one's for Skylar. Is there a translation to the turkey dance, and like, what is the goal? One viewer asked.
Okay, translation of the turkey dance, and what is the what?
What is the goal or the purpose of it?
Okay, it's more or less like a social dance after a ceremony or something. It's more like just a happy, good, It's where the males, the men, the boys and men dance this dance. And it's a real kind of a fast, athletic dance, kind of like a show off your awesome dance moves. And just more or less like the male birds, you know, how they puff up and do for mates and stuff. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like there's another version. Northern tribes call it the chicken dance, like a prairie chicken dance. Utes have more or less the turkey dance because that's what they ended up. I'm not too sure the exact definitions, but the purpose is more like a celebratory, good feeling dance after a ceremony. So they would, you know, the men turkey dancers and boys would do their thing, you know, a bunch of turkeys gobbling around, and everybody would be like, yeah, and they get that good feeling from it. So that's more or less what the turkey dance was.
And you know, the bear dance that Skylar talked about, because the dances are, it's not, a lot of them do have purpose and meaning, but some of them are social dances. The bear dance arose from, you know, if you think about not having a calendar without months, but you have seasons that have always happened in the moons, and the native people would celebrate spring with the awakening of the bear. You know, that means if all the food you caught or harvested was in August and September, and now it is March, it's getting difficult. Life was becoming more challenging March into April. And so the awakening of the bear means a new season and regrowth and regeneration. And that is a key piece to how the social dance of the bear dance comes about through, again, another story. And the bear dance is a social dance that non-natives can go to. I've been a couple of times up in Randlett. And participate, and it's really, and it was a great opportunity and very eye-opening for me to be a part of it, because it's always, I think for some non-native people, at least for me, I grew up in Missouri, we didn't really have a native presence here in the Roaring Fork Valley. We don't have a native presence necessarily other than Skylar, and so it's not a part of our vernacular, it's not a part of our normal culture and lifestyle, and so it's something that is, you know, I was very intimidated, but it was so welcoming and so joyful. So I just wanted to share with that y'all can go to the bear dance when we can go to the bear dance.
Always welcome to come to bear dance. Come check it out for yourself for sure.
Do we have any other questions?
Well, folks, I actually think that is all the questions we have. I do just want to say thank you to both of you. This has been an amazing presentation as always. I'm so glad that you were able to come in and do it virtually. Thanks to all the folks that came in and joined us and watched our second virtual lunchtime lecture. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another. Don't forget to check our website, our Facebook. We always have updates. And coming up on July 5th, we've got our Founders Celebration kicking off. So, like I said, visit FriscoHistoricPark.com for more information. And thank you all for being here, each and every one of you.
Thank you.